I put on this fire for cozy reasons, but now it kind of just reminds me of impending doom. So hopefully you find it relaxing and not terrifying. I'm just gonna get into it. My name is Lily, and this video is about sex work. Yeah. So if you've been on the internet in almost any capacity, but especially on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit even, you've very likely stumbled across a sex worker's social media page. And for the sake of this video, when I say sex work, I'm referring specifically to the online sphere of sex work, so creators who sell nudes or porn of themselves in any capacity. But honestly, it extends to sex workers of any kind. But this video is not going to cover like prostitution. The message of this video is pretty straightforward. Just because someone is a sex worker doesn't mean they will always consent. In fact, many of them operate under very specific conditions in home studios or their bedrooms where they feel comfortable, so alone or on a consenting partner, etc. So it's important things to keep in mind as we go through this video. The reason I bring this up is because, shocking, Instagram comments. You might notice that the comments on a lot of these girls' pages, typically when they complain about men who only want to hit it or just express an opinion in general, are both pretty dehumanizing and decide for the woman in question that actually, when she made an OnlyFans, she consented to being treated like garbage by every man alive. It should go without saying, this is not the case. When I discuss these comments, it's important to consider a couple of things. So number one, the message I already shared with you, which is sex work is a job, not a bat signal to every man that you are down to fuck whenever, wherever, with whoever, like a sex doll. Number two, objectification. We've all heard this word, but do we know what it means? According to the Oxford Dictionary, objectification is the act of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. Maybe you don't understand why that's an issue, we'll get into that more. Number three, we need to understand how objectification and dehumanization, the act of denying humanity to another person or a group of people, go hand in hand. And then finally, we need to consider the impact that dehumanizing a group has on said group. And what's really important here is that we care. So I'm very humbly sitting here and asking you, especially if you're a man watching this video, to give a shit and to not approach this from a place of defensiveness, but instead think about, I'm gonna pull out the tried and true here, how would you like it if you were treated this way? So this message is also kind of known as basic empathy, but you know, people seem to struggle with that, so. I will be listing all my sources in the description as long as YouTube allows me. It had an issue with me linking stuff earlier, but whatever, we'll see. I'm starting with a scientific article called Dehumanized Perception, a psychological means to facilitate atrocities, torture, and genocide. So obviously, this article mentions quite a few instances of dehumanization and their impact on dehumanized subjects in general, especially when it comes to, as stated in the title, atrocities, torture, and genocide. For the purposes of today's video, I'm not discussing genocide. I'm not discussing torture. I think it's important to note that dehumanization is a powerful tool for those in power to decide who gets to live a quality life and who rots in the street like a pile of garbage. The whole genocide aspect is a lot larger and is not gonna fit in like one 30-minute video. So let's get into this. Chapter 1. Objects do not suffer. The abstract of this article states that social cognition, or considering someone's mind, recognizes the other as a human being subject to moral treatment. Social neuroscience has reliably shown that participants normally activate a social cognition neural network to pictures and thoughts of other people. Our previous work shows that parts of this network uniquely fail to engage for traditionally dehumanized targets, homeless persons or drug addicts. This suggests participants may not consider these dehumanized groups minds. Basically, when we look at a person, our brain should recognize them as such. Thanks to a chronic societal stigma around certain groups of people, such as those listed in the abstract I just read, so drug addicts or homeless persons, our brains don't actually view every person as a person, and that's subconscious. It is my personal belief that as the commodification of women's bodies grows, especially in the online sphere, society strays further from viewing women as humans. In fact, studies have shown that dehumanization plays a pretty important part in domestic violence cases. As one article put it, objects do not suffer. When we view women as purely objects, we're less likely to care when they're assaulted, raped, murdered, etc. What's really important to mention here is that women are objectified more when they are being sexualized. As the aforementioned study states, we manipulated the presentation of a woman as sexualized or not, and purported that she had been involved in a domestic violence incident. We found when the targeted woman was sexualized and thus objectified, participants associated her with an inert, non-human object, i.e. mechanistically dehumanized her, more than when she was not sexually objectified. Editing Lily here, I just wanted to make clear on the final sentence in case you read it. It says that the subjects were not animalistically dehumanized, they were mechanicalistically dehumanized, if I'm saying that right. Basically, we viewed or dehumanized the women in a way that is like, oh, I view you as an object instead of I view you as an animal, because that's a different kind of dehumanization. Basically, the way we objectify and dehumanize women not only puts them in more dangerous situations, but also reduces the amount of empathy we have for them when they are in those situations. Think about the public response to sexual assault. Women in these situations are usually considered guilty until proven innocent, at least in American culture. Such cases usually boil down to one party's word against the other, but who are we more likely to believe? A man or an object? Chapter 2. Self-objectification. This is the part where things get tricky. A lot of the blame for women being objectified and dehumanized is typically shifted onto how they dress, and if they are sex workers. Sex workers are basically, I've noticed in online spheres with a lot of men, asking for it. In a black and white world with no nuance, perhaps this would make sense. A woman puts photos and videos of herself online in exchange for money. Is that not her fault for objectifying herself? I will say this much. We have offered women a kind of job that promises a lot of things. A good bit of money, the ability to work from home, a lot of available free time. For plenty of women, this is the appeal of sex work. It's also advertised to us quite a bit from a very young age. By men in our lives, women who already do it, and of course, the internet. This is also not to forget that sex trafficking is rampant and takes many forms, including cam work and other forms of pornography. Looking at you, Andrew Tate. In a sense, we have been groomed to view ourselves as a commodity, and that's still true for a lot of sex workers. They're not immune to that. The reality is that reality is not black and white. Not all women are the same. I'm sure plenty of women do it for the money, and I'm sure there are women out there who truly enjoy the validation that that kind of work could bring. That being said, self-objectification is a thing, but it's not something women are always aware of before they enter sex work, and it's not an invitation to be treated like an object in every facet of your life. Think about the amount of porn out there with the word used. Think about the porn titles equating women to sex dolls, fuck toys, etc. That language has a serious impact on our brains, whether we realize it or not, both men's brains and women's brains. Women are trained by society to view ourselves as less than human, to take care of our appearance in the same way we might polish silverware. The message we receive growing up from men and other women is that our value to society is almost entirely measured by how we look. We are groomed into objectifying ourselves. And now, with the ever-growing porn industry, we have obvious dehumanization of women. Mainstream porn where women are being hit, slapped, spit on, and more are portrayed as either enjoying it or reluctantly going along with it. Again, consider objects do not suffer. The more we see this as societally acceptable and the more people get off to it, the more we put women in danger. Not just physical danger, but in danger of viewing themselves as nothing but vessels for pleasure, losing their self-worth, and for assuming they have nothing to offer this world but their fresh, young bodies. Sex workers absolutely commodify images of their bodies, and objectifying themselves is in the very nature of what they do. But we have to consider why that is, and how we can help shift the general mindset around porn so that at the very least it becomes less dangerous and damaging for everyone involved. Chapter 3. The Online Sphere. This all brings me to one final point. The internet is making things worse. We all know algorithms have a way of pivoting people towards extremes, and that an ideological gap is growing between men and women online. But what does this lead to? The answer is comments like this. You literally sell your body online for less than bus fare. Of course he only wants to hit. Nobody wants to wife up the dollar menu. Let's break this down. The creator here is, as you likely gathered from this comment, a sex worker who sells nudes. In the video this comment was posted on, she's expressing her distaste for a man who only wanted to have sex with her. This commenter obviously mentions that she sells her nudes for less than the bus fare. Essentially, he's putting her down as a cheap sex worker, as though charging more for her nudes would make her more of a person in the eyes of the man she went on a date with. The commenter continues saying, of course he only wants to hit, nobody wants to wife up the dollar menu. Here we have a direct example of objectification and dehumanization. This commenter sees that the poster is a sex worker, puts her down for selling nudes, and compares her to the cheapest possible meal you can get here in the US. The commenter is implying that nobody could ever possibly love this woman due to the nature of her work, and the fact that, to him, that makes her an object. This is objectively a horrible thing to say to a person. He's calling her worthless because she sells nudes for, in his eyes, a disgustingly low price, though we all know the price doesn't matter. He would have put her down for selling nudes if they were hundreds of thousands of dollars either way. What he fails to do here is separate the person from her nudes. What she prices her nudes has zero impact or relevancy to who she is as a person. But to commenters like this, they cannot even comprehend that behind the nudes, there is a person, not just a body. Next comment. This one is a classic in incel circles. OF detected, opinion rejected. They think it's good because it rhymes. The reality is this phrase yells to the world, I do not view women who engage in sex work as people. The obvious issue here is yes, sex workers are people, and just because they do porn does not mean they are inhuman. They're very much human women who can love, hate, do math, vote, make art, whatever they want. They're people who also happen to do porn. This comment is the result of decades of dehumanization of women in the sex work sphere. Essentially, they are viewing women, specifically sex workers, as people who cannot form valuable opinions. You can do with that information what you will. This next one here, we have another example of rhyming. This commenter says you're literally only useful for a pump and dump, which, I mean, gross phrase. I don't think I really need to double down on this, but yeah, this is massively objectifying and dehumanizing. He talks about this woman like she is a fleshlight. And on top of that, this goes back to exactly what I was saying, where we are groomed growing up to just think of ourselves as women as something that is only useful for a man to get off. And that is a really harmful, horrible thing to think about yourself. Also, guys, just because it rhymes doesn't mean it's right. Do we know that? No? Okay, next comment. Of course that's all he wants because you have no value. You stopped being worth anything the day you made people pay $1 to see your chili ring. Ignoring that horrifying imagery, this one really upsets me. This is a very clear example of men only placing value in women's bodies. This is why objectification of women in any scenario exists. We are actively discounting women's thoughts, opinions, ideas of consent and control over their own lives because we equate their worth as a person, a human person, to their body. The second a woman does something with her body that this guy doesn't like, she becomes useless to him. It's heartbreaking, and I feel deeply for this creator, although the reality is she's probably used to this. Another example of this is Jason here, saying, of course a girl who sells nudes online would say he only wanted to hit, like you haven't already sold your soul for dollars. Foul. I find it equally fascinating and disheartening just how many men equate a woman's body to, quote, her soul. You'll see that pattern in the comments I literally just mentioned. The reality is we have no idea what this woman is like as a person. But these men are confident they do because she sells nudes. And because she sold images of her body, they interpret that as her selling her soul, aka who she is. Basically, they view her body as who she is, and then tell on themselves in her comment section. Another blatant example of objectification, this one even worse than some of the others thanks to how disgusting it is. I love seeing a toilet with an ego the size of a porta potty. Ha 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 ha. I didn't count the ha's. Don't cancel me for that. I don't think I have to explain this one. I mean, he called her a toilet. She's an object. And not only that, she's the grossest object he could think of. And also, him basically comparing a woman he views as unattractive to a toilet, and then a woman he would view as attractive as a porta potty really reflects the general opinion towards women. And that's really saddening. You might also notice a theme throughout all of this frustration in the comments, and the theme here is consent. These men assume that because she sells her nudes, she should be, and likely is in their minds, down to have sex with every man, including the one in her video. Because she said no to him and was irritated by his advances, the men in these comments took that personally. It challenged their worldview that sex workers are all hoes and whores and that they are used up. These are all common words and phrases in the nightmare that is the manosphere online, all of which contribute heavily to the objectification and dehumanization of, as well as violence towards, women. I'm asking anyone who might see this video to really consider your knee-jerk reaction when you see a woman. when you see a woman who is dressed in a more promiscuous manner, and finally, when you see a woman who makes pornography. If you're tempted to compare any of them to objects, I suggest you take some time to reflect on how that might be harmful to the women in your life and how it might get in the way of forming meaningful relationships, platonic or otherwise. Thank you.